I spent the past week learning Japanese. Today, I'll show you how I'm learning the language, methods to remembering a language consistently, and how I'll use the language moving forward. Konnichiwa. 52週間で50にスキルへようこそ。今週は日本語でした。I've never really been good at languages. Both in middle school and high school, I tried learning Spanish and French just like everyone else, and even a little bit of Latin. But it never stuck with me. Then when I started trying to learn languages throughout being an adult, I tried using apps like Duolingo, Memrise, then it really never stuck either. It wasn't until I came across a book called Fluent Forever. In Fluent Forever, it goes around different methods of learning a new language. It gives you very specific steps like using Anki, using phonetics, and using a bunch of different tools to be able to create a more consistent method of learning a language. I'm not going to use all the methods that are found in here, but it did give me a good format and roadmap towards learning a language. When you're in high school and middle school in America, you usually go about learning a language step by step. Of course, you learn hello, you say, how are you? Then talking about your family. I think in most cases, people don't really talk about their family off the bat. They usually talk about their likes, their dislikes, their hobbies, and then, eating and drinking, which is part of it and like on the earlier stages. But they don't really go over that as much. And we don't understand why things are used, why certain words are used in a language. That was until I learned about something called frequency dictionaries. Frequency dictionaries allow you to know the most used words in a language. By learning and understanding the most used words in a language, you're able to see what's consistent in a language and then put the pieces together of why it's used in a language and how the grammar connects together with the frequently used words. Then how did this lead me to learning Japanese? I could have learned Spanish and French, which are easier to learn from English. And I have learned a little bit of French, and I've been able to use a little bit of it when I was in France. But my frequency of being in contact with French compared to being in contact with Japanese is a little bit more. I do want to learn Spanish eventually, but I just have a like of Japanese since I was a kid. I've always wanted to go to Japan. I almost did a People to People that went to Japan. And I watch anime and Japanese shows and movies, so I think learning Japanese seems like the right step for me. I also practice a lot of Japanese philosophies, and I'd love to be able to read books in Japanese to be able to understand those philosophies on a deeper level. So I have this Japanese book that I've had for a long time. This was given to me as a joke from a friend that was Japanese, that actually lives in Japan now. Kanata, I hope you're well. He gave this to me as a joke, and I kept this as a memory more so of like the time I worked at Starbucks with him. I started looking through it and I was like, you know what, I think I should learn Japanese because I found it recently. So what am I using to learn Japanese? I'm using a few things. I'm using books, I'm using apps, and I'm using a friend that I have that speaks Japanese. With books, I found this 2,000 most common Japanese words in context, which is helping me understand the most common words in frequency, along with how they're used in the language. Then I'm using Genki. Genki is the most common way of learning Japanese. It's used in Japan itself, in language learning schools, and to help you pass the JLPT proficiency exam for Japanese. Now, becoming proficient in the vocabulary and grammar in language is important, but understanding how to actually speak the language is way more important to conversing. A lot of these books go through a very textbook and academic way of learning a language, but a lot of the times they won't teach you how to learn the language and speak it in a proper way. Now, going through the apps that I use two apps. Kind of three, but mainly two. I have a lifetime membership to Memrise, and I didn't use it for this because I didn't feel it was the right one, because I found a different app a while back called Renshuu. Renshuu is an app specifically made for learning Japanese, going through the process, and having a community based on learning Japanese. Along with that, I found another app called Busuu, which is another language learning app that I've been using to learn Japanese as well, and I feel like it's been a lot more help than it was for Memrise. For Memrise, I only used Japanese for a little bit until I pivoted to Renshuu and Busuu, and they have been instrumental in learning the language and learning how to say things that are very common in the language, having actual Japanese speakers learning it. In Busuu, there's this community option where you will say words in a language and people from that language will correct you. They'll be from Japan, but they're learning, like, let's say English or Spanish, and you can correct their English while they correct your Japanese. It becomes this buddy system of being able to speak well and being told how to adjust your speaking better to the language. Community is how you learn. Community of someone trying to learn English and you're trying to learn Japanese, and you're switching the language to be able to, like, hey, this is how you say this in my language, and then, hey, thanks for telling me how to say this in your language. Moving forward to Japanese itself, when it comes to Japanese, I feel like the most important part is learning the Hiragana, Katakana. Putting it into English terms, Hiragana and Katakana is like learning uppercase and lowercase of English. It's a lot more complicated because there are a lot of letters that look similar but are slightly different. But when it comes to Japanese, I feel like if you are able to learn all the letters first, that's probably the most important part, because you have to be able to read the language and then write the language if you want to become proficient in it. I've been taking a lot more time to learn Hiragana and Katakana and understand how the frequency of these words are used and the context that they're used in. So by learning Hiragana and Katakana first, I'm going to be able to read and write the language better, and that'll take me further to learning words with it. And so that way I'm learning words not in Romanji. Romanji is when it's put into English letters instead of using Japanese letters. And I want to be able to use Japanese letters instead of having the Romanji shown to me, and instead be reading and understanding Japanese. So once I finally learn Hiragana and Katakana, I'll be able to read and write more efficiently, and then I'll be able to translate into the frequency of Japanese, being able to read and write the language more fluidly. And then from there, I'm going to start learning the rules of the language. There's a lot of different rules in this language that by adding one word, it makes it a completely different sentence. And then also the inflection of your voice changes what a word means sometimes. So while I'm going through this process, I have a Japanese friend that is helping me learn the language as well and understand if I'm using the correct accent or the correct inflections, and will judge my reading and writing and language over time to help me adjust better to Japanese. That's what's important, finding people that know Japanese and speak Japanese to help you speak the language better. If you have friends that speak a language that you're learning, it's going to make the process a lot smoother, and it's also going to make you be able to spend more time with your friend and learn a language casually and speak the language in a more casual way instead of being very textbook. And what would I do with this language moving forward? I want to be able to speak this language, go to Japan, of course, one day, but also be able to speak this language in an everyday setting. I want to be able to go to countries and speak their language. Like, I might even try to learn Icelandic at one point because I'm going to Iceland at the end of the year. By learning a language, trying to become a polyglot, you're able to close the gaps of the world around us. And I want to become a polyglot eventually, and I want to be able to speak different languages so I can understand different cultures, understand different people, and make them feel heard instead of going to a country and speaking English expecting everyone to know. Because not everyone knows English. It's not the most commonly used language in the world, and by speaking in another language, you create a different connection than you would speaking your own language in another country. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope this inspired you to learn a language for yourself. If you thought this video was helpful, please like it so that way I know that I'm going about these skills in the right way. And subscribe if you want to see my journey of learning more of these skills as I go on. I'll be moving on to my next skill that could help you become more consistent in your life and be able to take better care of what you're doing on your day-to-day. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. See you next week.